Hey, welcome to Atlee Church. We're so glad that you decided to join us for today's service, no matter where you find yourself on your spiritual journey. Just to let you know a little bit about Atlee, Atlee is a safe place for those who've given up on church or never went. And our mission is simple: to reach seekers and equip believers to love God, love themselves, love others, and serve the world. Now, if you want more information about who we are as a church or ways for you to get connected, make sure to check out our website at atleechurch.org, or you can also visit us on social media or download our app. And we hope today that you find the service helpful and also encouraging no matter where you are in life right now. So let's get started with today's service.
Well, good morning. Oh, that was better than I expected. How many of you guys like to celebrate? Really? Prove it to me. Let me hear some celebration this morning. All right, very good. So my dad sent me a text this morning, and I just got it before I walked out here. It said, praying that you give a warm message today. And so I know it's cold outside, but I thought the best way to warm this place up is if we take some time to celebrate. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had an incredible week of celebrating, and I hope that you have too. But if you haven't, we're going to get in a celebrative mood right now. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to high five the person next to you. Wow, some of that was weak. But we're going to get there, all right? So now we're going to celebrate just some random things. So can we celebrate our Scottsville campus this morning? Let's hear it for them. And I want to celebrate the fact that there's some people online, even though they're not live and in person in one of our campuses this morning, they are live and in person in their PJs this morning. So let's holler out to them this morning. And if you're like me, you're just jealous that they're still in their PJs and you aren't, right? So, and then for Mechanicsville, let's celebrate Mechanicsville this morning. Well, like I said, it has been a week of celebrating, and it's far from over. I know for me this week, I've celebrated my 39th birthday again, which was really exciting to do. And I celebrated my 40th spiritual birthday this week. And then yesterday, got to celebrate Atlee's 27th anniversary. How cool is that? So 27 years we've been meeting on Sunday morning. And so just a lot to celebrate. And I don't know if you realize it, but God is the one who created this idea of celebrating, and he loves to celebrate. I mean, and all of heaven loves to celebrate it. In fact, there's this chapter in the New Testament. It's found in the book of Luke. Luke tells a story or recounts three different stories that Jesus tells, and they're all about celebrating. In fact, the first one is found in Luke chapter 15, and it's called the parable of the lost sheep. And so there's this guy, he has 99 sheep, he's a shepherd, and he loses one of them. He comes back in that evening and realizes that one of them is missing, and he leaves the 99 and he goes back out and searches until he finds that one lost sheep. And then when he brings it back in, he calls his other shepherd friends together and he says, celebrate with me. And then Jesus says this, he says, I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. So that's the first story that he talks about heaven celebrating. Then he tells another story. This one's about a woman who had 10 silver coins. Now, for us, that doesn't sound much because when we think of silver coin, we think of change in our pocket. At best, maybe a quarter, or even better, maybe a 50-cent piece. But for her, these coins, each of these coins represented a day's wages. And if you were here a couple weeks ago, we talked about this. We identified what a current day's wages look like for us would be about $188. Now, how many of you could stand to lose $188 today? Yeah, I didn't think so. So if you lost $188, imagine you had them in in an envelope, and maybe they were laying around the house, and all of a sudden you realize that one of the 10 is missing. What would you do to look for that envelope? You'd turn the house inside out, upside down, whatever it takes till you found that envelope, wouldn't you? Well, that's what she does. She loses one of her 10 coins, which is equal to a day's wages. Says she sweeps the house. She just turns it upside down until she finds it. When she finds it, she runs next door to the neighbor, says, hey, celebrate with me. Look, I found it. Thank goodness I found it. And then Jesus says this again. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So that's two stories back to back. Then he goes on and he tells one more. This one is about a son who decides to cash in early on his inheritance. Instead of waiting till his dad passes away, he goes to his dad and he says, hey, I'd like to have my share of the farm now. His dad agrees to it. The son leaves, goes off, just lives high on the hog until one day he finds himself, instead of living high on the hog, he was sleeping with the hogs and feeding the hogs and thinking, what in the world have I done? He starts to think about home and wondering if dad would receive him back to home. And so he puts this plan together. He goes back home, and as he walks up to his dad, he kind of falls on the ground and begins to beg, Dad, listen, I know I'm not worthy of any of this, but if you would find it in your heart to allow me to come back home, I would greatly appreciate it. To which the father says this, but the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a what? And what? Let's have a feast and let's celebrate. He continues, he says, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son, never mind, I'm going to end right there. We'll end there. So they celebrate. So three stories, and he really tells this third story to make a point. He's talking to a group of people, and he says, listen, even God likes to celebrate. And the one thing that he likes to celebrate is when a person who has walked away from God comes to their senses and comes back home, or a lost person gets found. He says all of heaven stops what they're doing to celebrate. Now, I don't know about you, but that's just an incredible scene in my mind, and especially when I think about what happened last week. Last week, after the service, I envisioned there's this banner in heaven. And there were over 15 names on that banner last week from people who had placed their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. And so I can only imagine the celebration that was taking place in heaven last Sunday afternoon in honor of all those folks. So can we celebrate for them as well? Guys, if that doesn't make you want to celebrate, I don't know what will. Then after that, then at the end of the service last week, we met with some folks over here by the baptism pool to answer any questions that we had. Now we have over 15 people who are in line to get baptized, to go public with their faith and celebrate God's grace in their life. So I'm looking forward to that. Those are going to start next Sunday and spread out over the next several weeks. And so excited about that. You're going to hear some incredible stories. Sure, give it up for that. And many of those people are in the process of becoming members here at Atlee, so becoming a part of the family that we sang about this morning. And so I don't know. Listen, if you want to know who we are, why we do what we do as a church, that's why. Now, we say this. We don't celebrate numbers for the sake of numbers. We celebrate numbers because every number has a name, and every name has a story, and every story matters to God. Every story is a story of God's grace. Amen? And so that's why we celebrate. Now, last week we started a conversation around this topic of we are Atlee. If there was one verse, as I thought about this coming into last week, I thought if there was one verse that captures who we are, it would be this verse in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 that says this: "See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God." See to it that no one falls short, misses out on it, that gets left out is literally the language, the original language that's used there. See to it that no one gets left out when it comes to the grace of God. If there's a reason that we exist as a church, that's it. For those of us who have experienced God's grace in our own life, we can't imagine not letting others and helping others experience that. And that's why we do what we do as a church. That's who we are. We're here to make sure that nobody misses out on the grace of God. Now, that's a great goal, right? Would you agree that's a great goal to have? Anybody agree with me on that? A couple of you, the rest of you are still trying to wake up. Maybe we need to serve you some more coffee. I'm not sure what it is, but that's a great goal to have. But here's the deal. How are we, everybody say we, how are we going to see to it that that happens? How are we going to see to it that that happens? Because here's the deal. Without a plan, it's just some nice words on a screen. It's a verse in the Bible. But without a plan to make that happen, well, it just won't happen. And so there is a plan, and today we're going to start talking about that plan. Now, this plan is going to be represented in these 7 icons that are going to pop up here. Each of these icons represents a play, in a playbook, if you will. And so let me give you kind of an illustration to kind of help explain this. So if my Vanna Ed would throw me my prop out here this morning, this could get interesting. All right, we did it. Very good. Can we celebrate that we practiced that all morning just to make sure that that happened? So I want you to imagine for a moment, you're a part of the Washington Commanders football team. You're like, who in the world is the Commanders? Well, they're formerly known as the Redskins and the Washington football team. Anybody know who I'm talking about now? All right, so I know, some of you would love to be a part of that team, and some of you are already shaking your head, but just imagine for a moment you're a part of that team. And it's time for you to take the field. And so they say, here's the goal. You've got this ball, and we want you to go out there and get that ball across the ball across that goal line down there. And so you walk out on the field with the rest of the players, and you're kind of looking around at each other, and nobody seems to know what they're doing, and there seems to be no plan. Not hard to imagine that for that team, is there? I'm just saying. I could pick a better team like the Dallas Cowgirls, but they're even worse. They don't even know what that is, so we won't talk about that. All right, on a serious note, and they know that the only way that they can get that ball from wherever it is to get it across that goal line is through a series of plans, if you will. In other words, somebody has sat down and helped them create these different plays that they're going to try to run to outmaneuver the other team and get that ball down there. That's the way it works, right? We understand that. And so watch this. Let's see which team Ed's praying. You ready, buddy? All right. He caught it. Let's give it up to him. All right, very good. As a church, we need a set of plays to employ to reach our goal. Otherwise, again, it's just a great verse. It's some great words on a screen or a great verse in the Bible. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about our set of plays. We call it the 7-step strategy. Today, we're going to focus just on the first 3 of these icons. And so the first one is this. Now, I meant to tell you this when I come out. Somebody asked, how do we take notes? If you use our app, you can get to the message notes there. You can download them there and follow along if you want to, but that would be the best way to do that. So the first one, step 1 is this: build relationships. Build relationships. Everybody say build. Listen, we never lock eyes with another individual who doesn't matter to God. So here's what I want you to practice for a second. I want you to look at the person next to you. Don't just look at them. Look at their face. Look in their eyes. Look into my eyes, no, sorry about that. I was told I couldn't do that. Listen, we never lock eyes with another human being that doesn't matter to the Father. And I tell you that because I hope that as you think about that from this point on, that you will begin to look at people differently. And I don't care who they are. I don't care if it's the person on the other side of the counter as you're checking out somewhere, the person that you're driving with or beside down the interstate, whatever it is, that you never lock eyes. That when you do look at a person, that you will look in their face, look in their eyes, and realize that that person matters to God. That person matters to the Father. Listen, our goal as a church is to train an army of bridge builders, people who will view every connection, every contact made throughout the week as if it's a divine appointment. Because honestly, we believe that they're not by accident, the people that God puts in our lives. To include people that maybe you're only going to see one time, but maybe you can say something that would make a difference in their lives. Instead of being mad with them, offer something that might turn their day around. But see every opportunity, every contact that you make with somebody else as a divine appointment. When it comes to the church, reaching people, no amount of advertising could compare to relationship building. Over the years, we put these cool signs out and make these flyers and all these different things, but the number one reason that people still come to church is because somebody built a relationship with them, invited them to come. When we survey people, when we get, people fill out cards and we ask, how did you find out about Atlee? So-and-so told me about it. So-and-so invited me to come. That is still the number one reason. And so let me talk to you just a second about the who. When it comes to building relationships, because some of you are like, well, who am I going to do with that? With complete strangers? Maybe. Why not? What would be wrong with building a relationship with somebody that you don't know and getting to know them a little bit better? What about a neighbor? Maybe there's somebody that lives on your street next door, across the road, or a couple houses down, or maybe it's the parents of the kids that your kids play with. What if you were intentional about building a relationship with them? What about family members? There's some family members that we have that would be good to build some relationships with, wouldn't it? Especially with this idea of building a relationship with somebody because somehow we want to introduce them to God's grace. What about, I'll say, old friends? Maybe some friends that you used to know that you haven't connected with a while, or you see them on Facebook all the time, and maybe there's just a way that you could reach out to them. And even now, I will bet you, and I'm going to ask by show of hands, how many of you right now have already thought about somebody, like a name just out of nowhere popped in your head? Anybody? Yeah. That's not by accident, okay? We all know there's somebody that we could be intentional about building a relationship with. What about places that you frequently visit, that you shop? What about building relationships with those people as well? Here's the deal. Be intentional about building relationships with those outside the church. Here's what happens. When we start coming to church and we get involved in church, all of a sudden our friends become the folks who are sitting around us, and we're less noticeable of those outside the church. And it's like we forget that we once were one of those. And for whatever reason, I don't know why it happens that way, but we do. But let's be intentional about building relationships with those outside the church. Again, some of you have already got a name of a person, or maybe you don't know their name yet, but you got a mental image of them. And I want to encourage you. I believe that was an impromptu by God. There's something that God is doing in that person's life that he wants to use you in a cool way to reach them. And so just pay attention to that. All right, number 2, second step, share your story. Everybody has a story. In fact, say that. I have a story. I have a story. You have a story. Everybody has a story. How many of you have had some kind of an experience with God's grace in your life? Anybody? All right, then you have a story, because you've experienced God's grace in your life. Last week, as we were meeting with people who were getting ready to get baptized, I got to meet two people, Trey and Jacob. And I remember, I think it was Jacob, I'm going to forget which one it was, I think it was Jacob, came up to me and said, hey, because one of the things we asked them to do is write down their story and tell us about, and he came up, he said, I don't think I have a story. And then he started telling me his story. And he said, it's short. And I said, it's not about how long it is. It was an incredible story of God's grace and how God had been working in his life and bringing him to that point. Even Trey shared the same thing. And I thought every one of us has a story because every one of us has had an experience with God's grace. Listen, the other thing I would say is as you build relationships with people, listen to what they're saying. Listening they're going to give you clues, ways to maybe start a conversation with them or to lead into your story. They may talk about how hard it is right now, getting through this time, or how hard, they're having a hard time in a relationship, maybe at home with their kids, with their spouse. Maybe you could share how God has helped you through those situations. Just listen for key words. I know in the last couple of weeks, there's two conversations that happened for me, and I've learned to try to listen for key words that gives me an opportunity sometimes just to start a spiritual conversation with them. A couple weeks ago, I was checking out at Lowe's, and the lady asked me as I was checking out, she goes, are you military? Do you have military ID for the discount? And I said, no, I don't. I am a pastor, though. And just kind of joking, I said, but I know that's not worth much. And she laughed. She said, actually, that's probably the most important job of all. And I thought, I'm glad you think so. And but then she goes, wait a minute. Aren't you the pastor at Atlee Church? Which started a whole nother conversation. She's been watching online and has yet to attend one of our physical campuses, but has been watching online, has joined a small group and attending that, which is really cool. But we got into a short conversation, and I say short because by this time there was 2 or 3 people behind me, and I didn't want to be that guy, you know what I'm saying? But I remember as she left, she goes, Pastor, I see what you did there. And I said, I didn't do anything and just walked out the door. I think she thought I was setting her up or somehow because I invited her to come to church with us. And then, I don't know, within the last week or so, we were at a restaurant, one of our favorite places to eat. Anybody ever eat at Chicken Salad Chick? Now, I know all the guys think it's a girl's place, but I'm going to tell you what, it is incredible food. You need to check it out. And so anyway, the manager was walking around the lobby, and he stopped and talked to us for a little bit, the owner of the store. And I was, listening to him, and he said something about, I'm blessed, and I thought there's a key word, all right? Not too many people use that, but they do, and some, it means something, some don't. So he's talking a little bit, and I said, well, by the way, I said, do you go to church anywhere? I said, I heard you say you were blessed, so I'm figuring maybe there's a connection there. And so we got into a conversation about him going to church, and he's not going anywhere right now, and so guess what I did? I invited him to Atlee, all right? So it's just that simple sometimes. Sometimes you'll get the opportunity to share your story, to share the difference that God has made in your life. Ask questions. Hey, can I pray for you? I heard you say that you're struggling with this. Is it all right if I pray for you? Or is there some other way that I can pray for you? Ask them where they go to church, or, what do they believe about the Bible? What do they believe about God? And it's amazing the kind of conversations that you'll start. So 1 Peter 3:15 says this. Always be ready to answer everyone who asks you to explain about the hope that you have. If you've experienced God's grace in your life, then you have an experience of hope. And we're encouraged to be ready always when God opens the door, when God gives us the opportunity to share with others the hope that we have. You know why? Because they need the same hope that we have. Whether they know it at that very moment or not, they need to experience God's grace in their life. And what I've found is most people are ready to experience God's grace. They just need somebody to explain it to them, to tell them about it. And the best way that you can do that is to say, let me tell you the difference that God's grace has made in my life. So be ready. I would encourage you to do this. I would encourage you this week to take a moment and sit down and kind of write out your grace experience. how did I experience God's grace? And just, I don't know, outline it, bullet point it, whatever works for you. But here's what will happen. As you do that, you'll find that you're much more prepared, much more ready to share your story with somebody else if you've really sat down and thought about it. It's a simple process, but try it this week. Just sit down and kind of write out, outline your grace story, your experience with God, and then watch and see how God uses it. Now, before we go into before I reveal the third point, we're going to get to hear an incredible story today from somebody who's been around Atlee since 1997. Actually, they came in 1996 and visited for the first time. And so theirs is an incredible story, and I just want to introduce them to you this morning as they share their story, and then I'll introduce the third point to you. So let's take a look.
My name is Gary Schiller.
And I'm Wendy Scheller.
The first time we ever went to Atlee was in 1996. We had come down to visit friends we were living in Massachusetts. A good friend of mine was down here, and we came down to visit, and he and his wife both said, "You can come down for the weekend, but you have to go to church."
But you can wear jeans.
But they said we could wear jeans and sneakers.
Oh, and sneakers. That was the clincher.
Yeah.
Jeans and sneakers.
It's only an hour. So we both rolled our eyes and said, okay, we'll go. So that was once in 1996. We then came back the following year and said, hey, we want to come visit. Can we go check out your church again? And they did say yes. We've been attending Atlee Church for almost 20 years. I distinctly remember sitting in the audience and the curtain opening, and there was this long blonde-haired guy with a screaming guitar playing something which I wish I could remember, but it was a secular song that was not a church song. It surprised the daylights out of me. And so that's how we started.
And you could understand what the pastor was talking about, even though you knew he was reading from a Bible. And it was like the message was just for me. I still remember the first message was about righteousness.
We had some personal stuff going on at the house we were renting. We were no longer going to be able to stay there, and there was a couple other things that were going on. Mm-hmm. So we said, and we got invited by Tom, you guys should move down here. I think it was a joke.
Yeah.
They might regret it now.
That's how you know if your friends are good friends or not.
But we moved down here, and then...
Oh, and we joined their small group.
We did join their small group.
They invited us, and what was interesting to me, finding out later and understanding more, was that they had been praying with their small group for us for a really long time, people we didn't know. I was blown away by that people we didn't know would be praying for us. I always say that God had to take us 500 miles to get our attention. We were living in Massachusetts. We were doing okay, but we hadn't been married very long. And I tell Gary now, I didn't think our marriage had a lot of longevity to it at that point. But when we moved down here, everything changed for us. We went to small group with our friends. Doors opened that hadn't opened. Gary got a job that was based on a conversation he had when we were here in July visiting and had not moved. He got a job based on something he had never done before. He had no experience doing, and he had no reason for a job like that. That's a God thing. So we just came to church. Once we moved, we came to church, and we didn't stop coming. And
Tom got me involved in doing lights.
Yeah.
Personally, I started serving because it was fun. I ran lights in the high school, so I was on the lighting board all the time, and it was a good thing because, and I joke about this a lot, even though it's partially true. I liked to be on the schedule, so I would go to church. And it was part of my reason to be here, because I'm not the most motivated person, and if I could find an excuse not to come to church, it usually, had lots of coffee in the morning. So being on the schedule helps me be at church, be plugged in. I got to meet a lot of new and interesting people. I have some very good friends at the church, and it helps. It helps me plug in, and then get to know people and talk to people, stuff like that.
Right. We serve because it's personal, because we're committed. This is our church. Why wouldn't we give it everything we have? If somebody wanted to get involved here, I would totally tell them that they should volunteer for the children's ministry. It's the best ministry, first of all. We have the most fun and the best kids. And that's definitely the best place. That's where I started volunteering, and I never stopped.
I don't know. I think the tech team might be a lot of fun too. It depends on who the person is.
But that team's not important.
Oh, okay. I see how this works.
No, the kids are more fun.
Tom, my good friend, was always asking questions and working on me, and I never even realized it. And I kept saying, well, I'm fine, I'm great, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, I believe in all this stuff that I thought was important. And Tom finally at one point in time just looked at me and said, well, the devil believes in God and Jesus also, and he's definitely not saved. So just believing in doesn't save you. And I think I told you about that conversation.
Yeah, we had talked about it, and I took the Contagious Christian class with Jeff, and I went home and talked to Gary about it, and we drew the bridge drawing that Jeff always draws on stage. And, he knew he didn't want to be where he was, and we prayed about it.
Yeah.
And, and then he got baptized that summer. And the day he got baptized, we were expecting our daughter then. I think Atlee is the kind of place that to help you feel like you belong, you get plugged in, you volunteer, you go to a small group, you come to the membership meeting, try things and get involved so that you can get an idea of what kind of church it is and see if it's for you. But it's worked out for us for a long time. This is our home. This has always been our home since the day we came.
That too.
Can we celebrate for them? Sure. Their story has always fascinated me. I don't know why I remember it so well. I remember when they first came down and visited, and I got to meet them. I remember when they moved down here. Gary started volunteering then on our tech team, and he was running lights for us in the high school. And I credit Gary with being the first person to give us a light show on the stage on Sunday morning. Before Gary, it was, lights up, lights down, lights up, lights down. And Gary started volunteering, and during the songs, he started playing with the lights and blinking them on and off, and so our light ministry has grown since then. The really cool part of their story, and they mentioned part of it there, was I remember, so Tom and Roberta, also good friends of ours, Roberta was on staff here. She was my assistant for a long time, but she I was leading the Contagious Christian class at the time. And it was a class to teach you how to share your story with others and how to do the bridge illustration. And she gave me a call. She said, hey, Wendy is planning on coming tonight, but she's pretty nervous, so just kind of be looking out for her. And so she came and she stood in the hallway forever. I didn't think she was ever going to make it inside the classroom. And she eventually came in the classroom and went through all 7-8 weeks of the course or whatever. But about halfway through, we start learning how to do the bridge illustration, and we encourage folks to practice it, learn how to do it with others. And Wendy came in and she shared the following week. She says, hey, I just got to share with you what happened this past week. I got to share the bridge illustration with a coworker. And she said, they didn't cross the line, but it was a great conversation starter. And she said, but the really cool thing was I then went home. I was so excited that I had actually done this and had this conversation with a person, and I just had to tell somebody. And so I made Gary sit down at the table, and I said, Gary, I got to tell you what happened this week. And she began to tell Gary what had happened that day. And she pulled out a piece of paper, and she starts doing the bridge illustration as she's explaining to Gary what she shared with a coworker. When she gets done with the bridge illustration, she looks at Gary and says, so where are you at on this picture? To which Gary says, oh, that was tricky. That was sneaky. But they prayed together that night, and Gary gave his life to Christ and became a Christ follower as well. And they've been serving in the church even before then. Gary right now, we're actually paying him while we find somebody else to take his place. Only I'm really dragging my feet on this. Don't tell him that. We're looking for another tech person to help us out. Gary has volunteered to help. He has a full-time job, but he's doing that now, and we appreciate him filling in. Wendy has been serving in kids ministry since the beginning of time, I guess, and she is also on staff part-time here now as well. So if you check your kids in here in Mechanicsville in the preschool area, that will be Wendy. And so just when I hear their story, I think of point 3, which is this. Point 3 is to invite friends to a weekend service. When I hear their story, it all started with an invite. Tom and Roberta invited them to come to church. Actually, it's one of these deals, it wasn't really an invite. They didn't really give them a way out. If you're going to come and visit with us, you got to go to church with us. What a great way to do that, right? But again, through that one invite, look at the difference that it not only made in their life, in their marriage, in their relationship, but now they've given their lives to serve others and help others experience the same grace that they found in their lives. It takes me all the way back to John chapter 1 in the New Testament when I think about the power of the invite. In John chapter 1, it's kind of the beginning of things, the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And it started with an invite. Jesus sees a guy named Andrew, says, Andrew, come follow me. Andrew runs off, finds his brother Peter, and says, hey, come follow me. Come meet a guy. We believe he's the Messiah. He's the one that we've been reading about and studying about and learning about since we were kids. And so Peter comes, and now there's 2 people following him. And then next thing you know, a guy named Philip gets an invite to come follow, come be a part of this. And so the first thing Philip does is he runs off and finds Nathanael. And says, Nathanael, you're not going to believe this. Come meet a guy. We're certain he's the Messiah. And so just this power of the invite. And here we are thousands of years later, and it's all about the invite. I'm just curious, how many of you are here because somebody invited you to come and be here? Look around the room. Isn't that amazing? All because somebody just said, come with me. Come with me. Do you know that 1 in 4 people say that they will come to church if somebody they know will invite them to come with them? So the question is, what 4 people are you going to invite this week? Because one of them will show up. The odds are that at least one of them will show up. It all starts with the invite. So that's our plan. Build, share, invite. Can you say that with me? Build, share, invite. That's the first 3 steps. And that's what I want you to work on this weekend or this coming week is building relationships, sharing your story, and then inviting somebody to come with you. And I'm not saying that it has to be in that order. All right, you can skip to the very last one and just invite them to come with you. That's okay. All right, and maybe you'll get to share your story some other time. But these are plays, not necessarily got to be played out in this order, but these are plays for us to reach our goal. And so here's how I want to end today with this. The challenge this morning, and our 3 questions for the end is this. Who can I start building a relationship with this week? Now, many of you already know who that's going to be. Many of you raised your hand and said, I already have somebody in mind. But if not, and you don't know who that is, then just ask God, God, would you nudge me this week? You know, who it is that you've placed in my life that I can begin to build a relationship with them. And it might be, you think, there's no way I could ever do that. I don't even know that person. But if God puts that person on your heart, then I will encourage you to start praying for that person. There's a saying that says, we don't talk to our friends about Jesus because we don't talk to Jesus about our friends. The cool thing in that story was Roberta and Tom's small group was already praying for them, and they didn't even know it. God was already at work in their lives. And so just pay attention to what God puts on your heart. Number 2, write out your experience with God's grace. I want to encourage you to do this. Guys, you've seen me do the bridge illustration. I can do it with my eyes closed. Can I tell you a secret? There are times that I still practice that illustration because I want to make sure that when I share it, that I share it as precisely and clearly as I can. When I think about my story, you know, I appreciate the Bible college that I went to. They challenge us to learn to share our grace story, if you will, in as little as 2 minutes, or if God gives you 2 hours to do it, you know, great, but you know, to do it as quickly as you can, or if you have the time to tell the whole thing. And so they would give us, you know, imagine you're standing at a bus stop getting ready to get on a bus, and you know you got about 2 minutes before the bus is going to get here, and this person's just asked you a question. What can you share with them that quick that God might use in their life to introduce them to God's grace? So again, be ready always, the scripture says. And then number 3, who will I invite to come with me Sunday? Who will I invite? I heard somebody say one time, we were talking about this from the stage, and they said, you know, prior to coming to Atlee, I never thought about inviting anybody to come to church with me. I just went. I thought that's what people do. And she said, I never thought about inviting. So if you've never thought about inviting somebody, now I hope that thought never leaves your mind and you're constantly looking for somebody to invite. Would you stand with me this morning as we close? Again, next week, do not come alone. Bring someone with you. Who knows who we might be celebrating next? Father, I thank you for a church called Atlee Community Church. God, I thank you for the vision that you had for this ministry almost 28 years ago. God, that you put it on somebody's heart to be a church that really is and cares about helping others find the grace of God and experience it in their life. God, I thank you that I've had the privilege to be a part of this in many different roles over the years since the very beginning. God, what a ride this has been and continues to be. And God, I believe that we've yet to see all that you want to do in and through this ministry. Father, we are Atlee. It's not about me. It's not about the staff. It's about every single one of us who consider this place home, who consider this place family. And so, God, help us, Lord, to employ these plays this week. And, Lord, I just thank you for what you're going to do. Lord, we love you. We praise you. And, God, we celebrate your goodness and your grace today. And we all agree together and said, amen. Hey, listen, God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Well, thanks so much again for stopping by. If you have any questions or would like to get connected here at Atlee Church, we would love to help or serve you any way that we can. And if God is doing something awesome in your life, we'd love to hear about it. You can email us directly at stories@atleechurch.org. And if you would like to support the ministries here at Atlee financially, you can go to our website and click the top tab, Give, and that helps us continue to get these messages out there and make a difference in the lives of so many. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you again next week.